Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I am Joe. With me is Greg, as always. One more week left of February. Greg, the weather's starting to turn. How are you doing?
Oh, it's warm out. The snow is melting. Unfortunately, my fifth grade boys, our season is done, so my attention completely turns to college basketball. March 1st is Saturday.
That's right. You'll probably see more tweets on our Twitter account throughout the rest of the season as we have more to tweet about, more bubble talk, more of all that. But we're going to get to a lot of things here on this show, Greg. A lot of things to go over. We're going to remind everyone that top stories first. Then we'll kind of do a quick recap of last week, and then we'll go into our picks for next week. Let's start off, Greg. It's a debate that has been probably all over college basketball media, but we have not taken our stance yet. Maybe one of the closest National Player of the Year races of all time, and not just because these two players are awesome, but because their teams are awesome as well. Who's your Player of the Year, Greg? Is it Janai Broom? Is it Cooper Flag? Who are you going with? Still, hey, this can change too. We have a couple more weeks of basketball before they vote. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think for me at this point, unfortunately, the factor that I don't want to say most plays into it, but one of the variables that for me kind of not settles just debate, but gives Janai Broom an edge is the conference that he plays in. He's doing this against far superior competition. And unfortunately, there's nothing Cooper Flag can do about that. I guess he could have committed to go somewhere else, but I don't think anyone could have foreseen what the SEC was going to be this year. I mean, if you want to just talk numbers, I mean, there's both of these guys have stupendous numbers. I don't know that I could just list off points per game and blah 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 and stuff, but one of them is doing it against top 15 teams night in and night out, and the other one is in the ACC. I mean, I wouldn't I now I wouldn't have a problem if somebody said Cooper Flag was the superior player. Last I checked, uh, Joe, is he still leading his team in what was it, 4 or 5 statistical categories between points, rebounds, blocks, assists, and steals? I think it was either five, all five, or 4 out of the 5. I mean,
it's five.
that's insanity. It's, I don't have a problem with it. It's just if you make me pick between the two, I'm gonna pick the guy that is going up against ridiculous teams literally every conference game.
Yeah, that's where I'm standing too. I do think that this needs to be a conversation where things are laid out before we do this. Like the stats are very similar. You look at the averages per game. You could say Cooper Flag has the head-to-head win, but that was at Cameron Indoor, so you're kind of like, okay, maybe he has the edge there. This is not an award for like who's going to be the best pro. Like Cooper Flag's going to be the number one pick in the NBA draft. There's almost no doubt about that, and he deserves it, right? Um, and college basketball is a sport where there are national player of the years who come from conferences that aren't the best. So Obi Toppin back in 2020 from Dayton, Jimmer Fredette 2011 when Brigham Young was still on the Mountain West at that point. Um, you know, Jameer Nelson, St. Joe's back in the A10 in 2004. It happens. So I think the difference this year is how many big games Auburn has played. And we talked about how many quad one wins they have, how many quad 1A wins, if you believe in that they have. That's the difference. I know you said something similar, but it's when the stats are this close, the teams are this close. You can't even say best player on best team because I think that makes it like a conversation where it's kind of like who's better. Uh, I think you have to go Janai Broom. Now that's something that not everyone agrees with because I think watching the games, you can see that Cooper Flag is going to be a better pro. The things he does is a little bit different than Janai Broom. But I also watch some of the Auburn games and I look up at the scoreboard and it's like this dude has 20 points. I thought he had like five. Like it's just how he plays. Um, I would say Janai Broom deserves it. I would probably vote for Janai Broom. If someone, this is a debate where if someone said they voted for Cooper Flag, I wouldn't have a huge issue with it. I would just hope that if they were voting for Cooper Flag, they are one of those people who say Gonzaga gets a good player next year, that they would vote for a Gonzaga player, even though they play in an easier conference, because the ACC's has like 3 teams in the tournament right now, pretty much, and maybe you get 4 if they're lucky. this is not like the conference that we all kind of grew up watching, or even the last 10 years kind of had watching. So that's my only thing is like if you vote for Cooper Flag, that's fine, but that shouldn't stop you from voting for an Obi Toppin down the road because he plays in a smaller conference. From and a Jameer Nelson or any of these guys from the past who have gotten the award from smaller conferences, because that is such a big talking point with college basketball. Most of the time with Gonzaga, in terms of like, hey, I can't pick them in March because they played in a bad conference. Well, and I think we have to kind of view the ACC in the same way. So I'm using that as a barometer for picking Jedi Broom. But if people do not do that, then that's what I'm saying they probably should do is just make sure it's at least fair year to year with your thinking, or at least explain your thinking to us, because it can be something that this is going to be a contentious. It's going to be a contentious award this year. It's going to be something that I don't think there's an 100% right answer. All right, so you have our take on that debate. We'll make sure to update our thoughts when it is announced for sure, and just as we go along here, if something happens, if one of them gets injured or plays bad down the stretch, that could change our stance on this one. So next thing up for us, Greg, Dusty May signs an extension with Michigan. Now this is important for a couple of reasons. Michigan has played probably better than most anyone thought this year, contender for the Big Ten. But because Indiana has a job opening and Dusty May has ties to Indiana, this kind of says, hey, you're staying with us. I'm not sure how much good that's going to do if Indiana does break out the checkbook, but at least sets a good precedent that Dusty May um, could stay there. It's going to take a lot to get him to leave for Indiana.
Yeah, this is one of those things where the media is all, hey, what's going on with the Indiana job, and he's getting questions about it, and then they get this done. So good on Michigan. I heard somebody made a comparison to Brad Underwood when he was at Oklahoma State, and they basically said, Brad was there for a year, and look what he's done at Illinois now. And it's like, if you think you got the guy, you gotta lock him down and you gotta sign him. I guess you could still potentially say, well, if Indiana wants him bad enough, I'm sure the buyout is in the tens of millions of dollars, and they could pay it. But I mean, like, Michigan has done it. They've put as many barriers as they can. Right? That's really all they can do. I mean, unless they have them go out back and sign a blood pact or something, I don't know what else they can do at this point. So they did their job. They got it done, and they gave, good on them, because I'm sure Dusty was, whether he utilized the leverage or not, he he was in a position of power. So he, I don't know if you've seen any deal terms or anything, but good on them for getting it to a point where they got it to what he wanted, and he said, "Yep, I'll sign it," and we move on. I mean, we won't know anything until the off season or whatever. But
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to this one. I'm going to say that it is a good idea to try to keep him there. It is a good idea to kind of have this extra barrier there. Michigan might be a better job than Indiana. Maybe people in Indiana won't like that, but we're getting to the point, Greg, where maybe we've mentioned it with Duke of like, hey, John Shire's doing a decent job since Coach K retired, but he doesn't have a national championship, and last year came short of the Final Four, right, with NC State beating them. But if you talk about historically, Duke might just be about one coach. And we're getting to that point with Indiana too, where it's like they haven't had that great coach in 20 years, where kids like growing up today, they have no idea who Bob Knight is. They have no idea what Indiana did all those years. They might be familiar with Tom Crean, but even that might be a stretch at this rate with how many years ago that was. So basically, that's to say we're getting old, but also it's Indiana's going to have to put a full court press on to get Dusty May to consider, because he might be in a better situation too. Like the alma mater thing is great, but when you take into account that he's already in a good spot and he just got there and all that, I think that kind of plays into it. So, yeah, I think it's good for him to stay at Michigan and for Indiana to find a different head coach, honestly, who can not that Dusty May wouldn't be successful there, but who I think can kind of get things rolling there. I don't know if it's like a tough-minded head coach who can kind of get them to buy into the Indiana program again. Because again, there's not like you can't just say, "Hey, we're Indiana, we're going to get five-star recruits. We have history. That's what we do." It's just not what has been happening all the time. So that is something to consider in the future as well. All right, so the next thing up, Greg, happened today, hours before we started recording here. Utah fires Craig Smith. Now, interesting, not in that they fired him because the Craig Smith era hasn't gone kind of how they thought in Utah. Um, but it is weird that it happened now. It is during the season, and there has been no reports or anything that like anything bad happened. I mean, the way I think about it, Greg, is like something must have happened behind the scenes. It could be something, criminal. It could be something not criminal. It could be just friction with upper management at Utah. It could be a lot of things. Uh, they are 15-12 this year. They are 7-9 in the Big 12. They've just notched some pretty big wins. And while he is 65-62 at Utah, he has gone and to help transition them from the Pac-12, where I mean, last year they were 22-15, they were right, near bubble contention, to now where it's like it's 15-12, and now they're in the Big 12. He's transitioning them into this new league, and they're seemingly finding their footing. So I think the timing of this makes it weirder than anything else.
Yeah, I mean they're just coming off. Although they've been sliding, they're coming off a win over Kansas that we talked about last week. They beat Kansas State this week. They do lose to UCF. I mean, this is one that with the timing, I agree with you. Maybe we won't. Maybe we will find out. Maybe we'll never find out. But this could be one of those like it just got to the point where the AD and the coach just philosophies clashed. They knew it wasn't going to work out, and they just said, "All right, there's no reason to, there's no reason to keep him here." One interesting note, Joe. Do you know who the interim head coach is right now?
I do not.
It is Josh Eilert, who was an interim coach last year. Poor guy. Probably
Yep.
not going to catch a break this time. So, like, who knows? I mean, like, if they go on some miracle run here, I don't know. I feel like it's his second audition for his job. So who knows what will happen with that? But I saw that. Thankfully, these are the little snippets you get on Twitter when I was looking through the press release from Utah Athletics or whatever. Somebody retweeted it, and I looked in the comments, and that was the first thing I saw. I said, "Oh, that's interesting." Interim head coach Josh Eilert. Where have we heard that before? So, he came from Utah State, correct? I can't remember where he came before that, but I mean, like, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, yeah, the Big 12 is not what it was last year, but he's obviously been in a it's weird because they just joined the Big 12, so I don't know what life would have looked like for him if they were still in the Pac-12 this year, if that was still a thing. It's not like they've been in the Big 12 for 4 years and they've been floundering. I mean, they've kind of just been in the Pac-12, and what do we know about them besides Javon Smith transferred to St. John's and looks like he's a great player for them. So there's just, I'm with you. Something, whether it was a philosophy or, I would be surprised if it was like a bit, I don't know if you want to call it not a behavioral thing. No. I would be surprised if it was, I don't want to call it a behavioral thing, like a off court issue type. I would be surprised if it was like a DUI, that type of thing. I don't know what you want to call that. I feel like this is, I feel like it's weird timing, but it doesn't scream like, we're going to get a police report of, he beat up his girlfriend or whatever kind of thing.
Yeah, the timing is weird. I do not think it's a bit. That's what it sounded like Greg said at first, but that'd be really funny if they fired him as a bit and then brought it back. But
I'll enunciate more from now on.
Yeah, it's all good. But he did such a good job with Utah State. He gets the Utah job. First year's bad, but he starts building. He goes from 11 wins to 17 wins to 22 wins, and then this year they're in a new conference. And like, yeah, they just lost to UCF, and that would be nice to have. They'd be 8-8 in conference, but you're right. Like, it's not the same old Big 12, but it is a very good conference, and that'd be great considering I believe they were picked to finish 16th in the conference, and they're tied for like 8th or something if they, right now. So
They are
That's
right next to West Virginia. They're right behind West Virginia and TCU, and right ahead of Kansas State and UC in the Big 12 standings. I just happen to be looking at it. I
right.
mean, like,
Overachieving.
yeah,
And like talk about Brandon Carlson's gone, Davon Smith transferred, and I think some of that might be due to NIL, maybe not having enough NIL infrastructure to kind of keep those players. So there's a lot to think about when like I don't know. I think as the AD said, we were excited about hiring Craig Smith, but today I'm not. So I don't know what that means. A lot of people are saying NIL stuff, and maybe that can revive the program, but yeah, I think he's still a good coach. I think it's a tough situation. And again, he had this thing kind of roll. Like he was improving, 5, 6 wins a year. And this year, maybe not as much, but also with that transition with losing so many players, like I think it was like, okay, it's kind of cool. It's kind of good that they're not like, it's not good, but it's like he's doing an okay job, even though they're not winning all these games. So um, I think he'll probably get another job decently quickly. I don't know what level it'll be at, but I think he gets another job. Maybe Utah is doing this, Greg, just because of the schedule with college basketball, and we know transfer portal opens, somewhat during the NCAA tournament, and they need to get a coach in there right away, and they know they're not going to the NCAA tournament, which I would say pretty much for sure they could.
hey,
Who knows? Who
don't count
knows?
Josh Eilert out,
Oh
brother.
boy, oh boy. But yeah, so that maybe that's why they made the move is just the transfer portal and getting everything in line for the next head coach. But I still think you're doing this current coach dirty, and that might make future coaches may not want to take that job because of this. So we'll
Joe,
see
the
how
only
it all plays out.
the only other note. I mean, we've already said it before. There's no reason to repeat it. Well, there's no reason to dive into it, but just reiterating, our power conference openings keep growing, and our list of hot candidates is the pool is exactly the same as it was at the beginning. Like, not I'm, if anything, you almost wonder if someone is going to benefit from a March second weekend, type, an FAU type run. Although they were that season, they were in and out of the back of the top 25, so it wasn't. It was a surprise they made the Final Four, but it wasn't the biggest surprise that they won a couple games in the tournament. But this almost feels like, yes, there is an expedited timeline with the transfer portal, but just with the number of openings, it feels like someone just might win their way into a power job. Could happen.
Yeah, it might be that. It might be a lot of these like up and coming head coaches are taking assistant jobs too. So it might be some of these assistants that we've seen, like maybe like, oh, this is like the next guy for this job, might be leaving those current jobs they have to go take their own head coaching job rather than wait for these somewhat legendary, sometimes legendary head coaches to step down. So looking at maybe more assistants getting these jobs if none of these mid majors step up. After I think we've had a couple good years of like mid major coaches moving up, and this past year we mentioned Mark Byington and Jared Calhoun and everything. Now it's kind of different. So we'll see how that plays out. And you're right. I think it's very important to watch these conference tournaments, to watch these NCAA tournament to see who those candidates might be.
That's a good point, because I feel like there's been about 6 times this year where I've texted you. I've been like, "Do you know who's on staff at?" So we don't need to go into exactly who, but like I feel like I've had that thought 5 or 6 times this year, and those are just the ones that we talk about. So Jai Lucas' name is getting thrown around for the Miami job. So I mean, we haven't mentioned his name at all, and now he might be Miami's next coach. So
Yeah. It's good you brought that up. We didn't have that on our list of things to talk about, but it is important to note that some people are saying he's the next head coach. Some people are saying it's not done yet. But Jai Lucas, who is a Duke assistant, he played in his college career at Texas and Florida, and he was a Kentucky assistant before that. He's known as a very good recruiter. Haven't really gotten to see what he can do. Haven't really heard that he's a good X's and O's assistant coach. It doesn't mean he isn't one, but just he's not like one of those guys who's known for being a guru in that regard, but maybe very good with player relationships and good with NIL, probably good recruiting. So Miami's taking a big swing by having him replace Jim Larinaga. Albeit this is not official news yet, but just saying that that could be the move for a lot of people. Is like, hey, he's an assistant at Duke. He's now going to go to Miami. I think this is a good hire for Miami because they do have some infrastructure with NIL and they could recruit pretty well. So I don't know about you, Greg, but I think taking a swing on someone like him might be the best thing you can do in this upcoming offseason where there aren't a lot of major coaches to go after. He's a good recruiter. If he doesn't have the X's and O's figured out, maybe you get him some assistant coaches who can figure that out. But I think I do like that potential hiring as well. Any thoughts?
No, I think I told you about everything I could possibly say about this topic. I think we're ready
Oh,
to
you
move
don't.
on to Michigan State.
All right. Well, Greg doesn't like John Lucas, that is for sure. Uh, but all right. So big week.
There's not much I'm gonna say when it's rumor. If he'd been hired and Miami would have had, then yeah, we'll talk about it. Like I would rather save all, any commentary for he is hired, he is announced as the head coach.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. We know he's a good recruiter. We don't know X's and O's. We'll get to more of the nitty gritty
Yeah,
talking about
I
that
can't
when
add anything to what you
and
just said about that.
and you already agreed that some of the assistants might be the guys getting the job. So that is fair. Let's move on to Michigan State. Greg, they early in the week they play Purdue. They're at home in this one. They win 75-66, which is a big win because Purdue is a team that we mentioned this whole time is maybe the highest floor of any Big Ten team, and they played pretty well this season. So they get that win, and then on Friday they beat Michigan 75-62 to sit at first place in the Big Ten. This week has been big for them in a couple different ways. We could go analyze each game if you wanted to, Greg, but to me, Jace Richardson's emergence is kind of what I noticed in these games. Like we talk about how they have a lack of shooting, that's still showing up in these games. But him being able to shoot the ball pretty well, especially in that Michigan game, the second one, was huge. And that could take them from a team that I think, hey, maybe they win a game or two in the tournament to if Chase Richardson gets hot and they put the ball in his hands, maybe they could go on a little bit of a run.
Yeah, Joe, I think you make a good point about Jace Richardson. He can create his own shot, and that seems to be giving them a few more of those deep opportunities. But I also noticed across watching both of these games for them this week, they seem to get much better looks from outside the arc off of a Carson Cooper or Jackson Kohler paint touch. When it comes off of a paint touch, when they play inside out, it seems like they get better looks. Now, Jace Richardson, he can create his own shot. He can get himself an open three here or there. And I'm not saying they need to be taking 25, 33s a game, but I do think they've maybe worked on their philosophy a little bit and kind of understanding like we got to shoot it outside sometimes, or we just might get shot out of the gym if we play Alabama or those teams that they get hot on the night. Then there's nothing we can do. We have to at least try to be able to do this in case we get down in a game, so we know how to handle it and whatnot. The other thing they do really well, Joe, they run the fast break real well. Sometimes it's off of a made basket. You see them trying to get. It almost reminds me at times of. I feel like we watched Gonzaga teams do this a couple of years ago, where made basket and they're down the floor. Sometimes it's weird because when they set up in the half court, they don't necessarily play fast, but when they have a chance to get on a break, especially on those live ball turnovers, that's what killed Purdue. Braden Smith had, I think it was 6 turnovers. Maybe he ended up finished with more, but a lot of those live ball turnovers turned into buckets for Michigan State, and that just killed Purdue in that game. So obviously something to monitor there. What goes on with Purdue, but we're at the point with celebrating Michigan State, and Joe, I'm starting to look at this team and be like, man, I've kind of written them off, as like, okay, yeah, whatever. They won a lot of games, but you maybe take a fresh look at the resume. All right, they won 12, 13 straight games. They went on their trip out west. They lost to SC and UCLA. All right. Weird loss to Indiana. And other than that, lost to Memphis and Maui, and they lost to Kansas at the beginning of the year. Are they Elite Eight good? Are we getting to that point? I'm starting to believe in this team even without an elite perimeter presence.
Well, that's the problem because I don't think they have an elite post presence either. So, they had, I think in the game against Michigan, they had 2 points from Jackson Kohler. Zapala had 0, so their starting front court had 2 points combined. Cohen Carr, regardless of whether he plays, he's probably more of a wing anyway, but 4 points. Xavier Booker had 3 points. And Carson Cooper had 6. So They're not getting much production there. And honestly, Izzo's doing a good job of limiting the rotations. Xavier Booker played a combined 14 minutes over the last 2 games. He is a former prized recruit, and he didn't play much last year. And we're kind of like, what's he doing? And now he's not playing much this year. So maybe there is something to Booker's game that Izzo doesn't like. I don't know. But I'm with you. I don't know what to say about this team. I will say that I don't think Elite Eight's going to be happening from my perspective, unless I see Jace Richardson continue to get the ball in his hands and to play well. He has been inconsistent for the most part, but I think he might be turning a corner. He did have 12 points against Purdue and then the 21 points against Michigan. And having him in the starting lineup more recently, I think has been important for him. And I think moving forward, that is the way they get there because they're still having inefficient shooting nights. And I don't know if their defense can make up for that. So, like, Jaden Akins was 4 of 14 against Michigan. And that's just like, yeah, he probably is a guy who should be taking some shots, but maybe not as many if you can give the ball in Jace Richardson's hands. So I don't know how to trust this team. I'll give the benefit of the doubt to Izzo, and I will say that maybe a win or two in the tournament, but I still think they're far away from being an Elite Eight team. And that's like, and the way to put this is like St. John's, I think, is like a similar team, in that they don't shoot the three well, and that they are going to play very good defense. I trust St. John's more because of the players they have, if that makes sense.
I mean, yeah, no, I buy that. I
Okay.
definitely think that that say, I mean, I trust St. John's more than I would Michigan State. I buy that. I still think that this team's got a pretty high floor. You might be right. They might not have the highest ceiling, but I think if you gave me a whole bunch of money and said, bet on this team to at least make the second weekend versus, I don't know, pick out another team, I
Yeah.
just feel like they're at least like just look up and down their season. Like, okay, nobody's been perfect this year. Even Auburn lost the game at home to Florida, which is a different animal than anything Michigan State's played this year. But still, like no one's been perfect, and they have a loss here or there. They lose in their trip out west. I mean, they've been about as consistent as you can ask. Maybe individually, yeah, they've kind of waxed and waned with the different pieces and players, but as a team, they've been consistent.
I think they've been pretty consistent too. I think we have to have a larger conversation about the Big Ten, and we're probably going to do that as a result of our recap when we have some Big Ten results that were surprising, and one Big Ten team who played an ACC team and got destroyed. So I don't know. I think the floor is pretty high. I don't know if I see them going on a run. I think college basketball has changed where if you have a good defense, I think it might prevent you from getting upset in the first round, but it also might limit your ceiling in terms of advancing far in the tournament. So especially when we play in some of these bigger arenas as well. As the farther you go on in the tournament, you play in these big arenas with different sight lines for shooters and everything. So, big week for them, and they definitely deserve credit. I didn't think they'd be at this point. I'm a big fan of Cohen Carr. He's one of my guys we talked about last year. I wish they'd play him at the four more and go a little bit smaller and kind of utilize their athleticism and try to get more guard scoring. But either way, they have talent, and I will trust Izzo more than a lot of other coaches who would be in the situation. All right, Greg, that is our talk about Michigan State. We have one more kind of top story, kind of like big thing we're going to do. We talked a lot about, how March Madness is more about, at least filling out the brackets is more about who you trust and who you don't trust. That doesn't always work out to our favor when we're filling out our brackets, but you have a segment you want to go over for, I guess, going over teams right now that we trust and right now that we don't trust.
Yeah, here's how I'm going to frame this to you. I'm going to call it trust exercises. We're going to pretend we're in high school and we're going on a retreat, and you gotta do your trust exercises, your trust fall or whatever. So I've got them divided up into three categories. Not quite the same as you had I like this team, I don't know about this team. I gave specific parameters. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with make the second weekend. Okay, teams I want to see if you trust to make the second weekend.
Okay.
Start with Purdue. 4-game losing streak, including UCLA, Rutgers. I'm sorry, they're in the middle of a 4-game losing streak. They have UCLA, Rutgers, and Illinois to finish out the year before the Big Ten tournament. They have 9 losses this year, which is, I think, like 5 or 6 more than they had all of last year. Obviously, team is very different than it was last year. in the middle of a skid right now, but they've also beaten Alabama and like had some really elite wins this year. Let's just say if you want to frame it like this, you got $100 to bet. Would you rather keep that money in your pocket or bet it and you would get, I don't know, plus 400? You'd make more money than just keeping it in your pocket, right? It would be would you trust it? Or no, I can't trust them.
Can't trust them. I'll give them credit. 3 of those 4 games were on the road, and they were tough Big Ten teams. But I think without Zach Edey, they are falling back into like Purdue. I think they could be upset. Zach Edey posed a different problem for different teams, different matchup problem for different teams. The whistle was different when he was in the game, which was usually pro Purdue. I would say it's a different type of atmosphere they have. Trey Kaufman-Renn is incredible on the interior. Braden Smith's play has been too erratic for me. He has a lot of assists some games. A lot of times it's bad shooting performances, but he also, like we said with the last game we talked about with Michigan State, Greg, a lot of turnovers sometimes. I don't think he handles pressure all that well. We talked about it, Greg. We thought he turned a corner. He's handling it better this year, and it's just like there's some games where you're like, you're the starting point guard. You can't have 6 turnovers against Purdue. So for those reasons, because I think there needs to be someone else who steps up, and like Fletcher Loyer has been inconsistent as well. Like I don't know if that's Miles Colvin, I don't know who it is. That seems like Matt Painter is like trying to figure something out with this team, and just like not a lot is working. That's all that being said, they are what 19-8 right now, or 19-9 right now overall. So still a solid team, but with the point guard having some issues with his shooting and with his turnovers, and not having Zach Edey and just needing a third person to step up, I think they could get got in the first weekend, especially maybe not in the first round because I think they do have enough talent to beat one of those teams. But Greg, I think we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago. These second round games are going to be incredible. We have some teams are going to be 7, 8, 9, 10 seeds who are, or maybe 7, 8, 9 seeds more specifically, who are going to be really good. And then before it gets to a weak bubble of like a 10, 11, 12 seed. So.
That's why we're doing this. Just wait till you see some of the teams I got here. My take on it, I still want to trust Purdue. I still like the guards. I know they're in a bit of a rut right now. This week it was the loss to Michigan State early in the week, and then they lose at Indiana. Just a weird game. It's a weird time. I am totally with you. They need something else from somewhere, whether that's going to be Camden Heide, maybe, making some athletic plays for them. He seems a little hesitant to shoot the ball. I know that's not his forte, but, Jakari Harris started in the starting lineup, and now it's CJ Cox. They need something else from somewhere. I am liable to believe that they'll get it. But I am going to be laser focused on what they look like the next couple of weeks before we get to including the Big Ten tournament.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay, if you don't have this team in your trust or not trust, would you trust Wisconsin or Purdue more? Because I'm pretty pro Wisconsin now. I know I wasn't a couple weeks ago when they had played anyone, but they look good and the offense is amazing.
I would feel more inclined right now. I can't quit the Purdue guards.
Okay.
It's a skid right now, and I think that yes, Wisconsin has a player that has the potential to drop you 45, and I think Trey Kaufman-Renn is great, but I don't think he's going to get his style, his physical style of play. I don't think you don't have that ceiling with him. Like he's going to give you 15, 20, 25 and 10, 12 boards, and he's going to be consistent, and he's going to take it into the mouth of whoever is guarding him. But Wisconsin has that X factor, and it's not just Tonje. It's Klesmit can go off, and it is a well-rounded team. But and maybe this is one of my problems as an analyst in general. Sometimes I just stick to some of these preseason expectations I have, and it's hard for me to quit them. I know we'll probably mention a team or two here that I just can't do an about face on, but with this one, I still got to stick with Purdue. I'm still team Braden Smith and Loyer, and I think someone else is going to step up and give them something. I don't think it's going to be huge. I don't think it's going to be giant. I don't think we're going to suddenly find another 17 points a game for them. but I think they're going to get another contributor between what, like I said, whether it's Camden Heidi finds a shot, CJ Cox, who obviously we know from a game he had early in the year, he's got potential to go off. Jakari Harris has been in and out of the starting lineup. I don't think it'll be Caleb First. I think he's just a good, solid piece to have. But I think there's something there, and Matt Painter is going to find it.
Gotcha. No, no, it's just like a preference thing too. Top of the Big Ten, like I know we had different discussions all year long where, first it was Purdue had the highest floor. They're the best team in the conference before the preseason. And then we got to the season and I was like, well, Michigan's kind of good. And Illinois might have the highest ceiling, but they still have some work to do. And now Illinois is kind of falling on their face. And Wisconsin come out of nowhere. Michigan State has been steady Eddie. So that's the reason why I asked you that. But I'll wait for your second team here, Greg.
All right. All right. So we'll try not to go, 5 minutes a piece on these. I got like 15 here. So
oh boy, yeah. Okay.
Second weekend, we're still make the second weekend. Arizona, they've lost 3 of their last 4, including to Kansas State and BYU. Although, BYU looks like they're working their way into the tournament. They had won 6 straight before this little rut. Do you trust Arizona, considering where we were with them early in the year? Second weekend.
No. It's been ugly. I'll keep it short for you since you have all these teams, but they at their peak, sure they can make the second weekend. They've had the rough start and now like a rough second phase where Caleb Love has been inefficient. And I don't think the rest of the players on the roster are helping him out enough. Partially on him, partially on the other players on the roster.
See, I'm with you. I feel like this is one of those teams that we were out on and then we were in on, and now we are both out on. I'd be keeping $100 in my pocket. And you'd have to offer me plus 10,000 or something stupid like, what's the number you say you always take it if you get plus what odds?
Oh, you say that usually, not me.
I thought it was one of you guys who said if somebody offers you plus 10 billion odds for something, you got to.
I mean, I probably have agreed with that statement because you take it on almost anything. But yeah.
All right, all right. I feel like the next 3 are actually interesting.
Okay.
So I just wanted to kind of set the phase for you. Marquette has lost 4 of their last 6, including Villanova. This is a team that you and I at times have been high on. Cam Jones at one point was, in talks for player of the year. That really died out once we got to 2025. There's still a lot to like about this team, but they've definitely been skidding. You trust them to make the second weekend, yes or no?
This is probably a recurring thing. I trust less teams than I don't know. I probably.
I mean, to be fair, there are only going to be 16 teams that make the second weekend, right?
Right. And if you're trusting them, how many of those teams do you actually trust to make it there in the first place when you fill out a bracket? So for Marquette, Cam Jones has cooled off, but again, I think it's a lot about the players around him. Props to Marquette for being a program that everyone's talking about. Like that's how you should build. You should develop the players and not go get too many transfers. I think they needed to transfer this offseason. There's just not a lot around him. And I think that's showing they could use more interior presence. If they get a bad matchup, say, again, maybe second round, if you don't want to think about first round upsets, which they could be upset first round. If they get a second round matchup with like Michigan or something, and they have those 2 twin towers, oh boy, that's a rough matchup for you. So I would say not trusting them either.
Here is one that I think is interesting because I think they're a great team, but efficiency sometimes lacks in terms of shooting. Texas A&M, they lost twice last week, but they lost to Mississippi State and Tennessee.
Oh, God.
You know that Wade Taylor has the potential to drop 30 and 35 in consecutive games, but it feels like the last couple of weeks, every time I look at a box score, it's 4 of 15, 5 of 18, something stupid like that. Granted, they get a lot of shots because of how good they are on the offensive board. So that's just a product of how they play. Trust them to make the second weekend or no? And keep in mind this is a top 10 team for most of the year.
I'm gonna say yes. I can't quit Wade Taylor. We talked about it earlier this year. But the reason why this year is different, I think, is because they have multiple threats on the perimeter. They still have all of those big guys who are like henchmen on the interior who they rotate in and out. And to be honest, they're probably going to have a better seed than most of the other teams we have talked about so far. So, if they're say like a 3 seed right now in Lenardi's bracketology, I think they could win their first round game. I think they could beat like some of the 6 seeds are like UCLA and Louisville, maybe Ole Miss and Clemson. at least according to Lenardi. I trust them enough to get that done. The inefficiency of Wade Taylor scares me, and the ability to, I guess, try to take over a game when he doesn't need to scares me. But they are ninth in defensive rating in KenPom, so there is more to just them being inefficient offensively.
So here's a scary thought I want you to think about. And I was connecting two trains of thought just based on what we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They are only 0.5% better from behind the arc over Michigan State right now as a team.
Yeah.
But it's weird because, like you say, they have more perimeter threats, and I'm like, all right, yeah, Zurich Phelps, all right,
yeah.
all right. CJ Wilcher, okay, yeah. Obviously Wade Taylor when he's hit, like, okay, I buy that. Hayden Hefner, guys are proficient shooters. I just wonder if it's just a volume thing. Their percentage is low. Just again, they get so many second chances. The best team in the country, or at least they were, in offensive rebounding percentage. So can't really hate on them if they're taking the initial three. It's a long rebound, and then they take the second one. Okay, that's obviously going to lower your percentage if you make one of two as opposed to just shooting one and making it. But this is one where I felt like we differed. There's something about the inefficiency that it makes me. And again, we're doing all of this out of context, right? So you could look at the bracket and, be like, oh, there's no way they missed the second weekend now. But out of context, looking at the team, there's just an inefficiency vibe that gives me the ick. And I will say I don't trust them.
Got it.
But there's a lot of season left.
Yeah, there is a lot of season left. I misspoke. They're sixth in defensive efficiency, ninth. But I understand why you would not trust them, because even though I do love Wade Taylor and I love the defense, all these teams are going to have concerns, but there's like, in my mind, I can already see, I don't know if you're going to call it flashbacks because it hasn't happened yet, but I can see it going through my mind of like Wade Taylor going like 3 of 18 in the game, and that's just ruining the game. So fun to watch when he's on, but not always the case.
So the next team is a callback to something you kind of already said, where you think these middle seeds, these 7 to 10 seeds might be really good.
Mm-hmm.
This team has lost 3 straight, and they are 500 since the turn of 2025, since the calendar turns January 1st. But they have been sick. They have been injured. They have been through the ringer. They are Illinois. Do you trust them to make the second weekend?
No. I don't. I said they were the team that had the highest ceiling in the Big Ten, and maybe that was there. Kasparis has been off. They have lost games to good Big Ten teams. They've lost games to average Big Ten teams. I think at their peak they can still get there, but they just got blown out by Duke as well. And I've got the ick with this team, man. I definitely could see myself being wrong because of Kasparis and how good he is. But this is like something I haven't seen before, with like being so good and just faltering so much from my expectations for him.
I just think between the KJ injury, Ivisic getting mono, Kylan Boswell's been in and out. They have had the flu the last couple of weeks go around their locker room. I still like the roster, and I know what it's capable of. If you gave me a 3 option, like a buy, sell, hold, I would probably hold, but I made the parameters, so I'm not going to break the parameters of the game that I made. So I will trust them to make the second weekend, even as the 7 to 9 seed that they will probably be, which means they're probably beating one of these really good teams that we've got somewhere.
Right now, they are the 7 seed for Lenardi, and the West region, and their second round opponent will be Iowa State.
Okay,
another one of Greg's favorites.
Now 2 of my favorites play each other. I don't know what I'm going to do. All right, Joe. Here we're moving on to a new category. I am presuming these teams will be in, but you can one up me if you want to say, Greg, I don't even think they're making the tournament. I don't think you will with these 4 teams, but you could. First one. I think you said you didn't want to talk about this team anymore, but here we are. Kansas beat Duke. They're 1 game over 500 since their loss to Iowa State. And they That included getting thrashed by BYU, getting beat by Utah, and losing to Kansas State. So, can this team win a game in the NCAA tournament, or are we getting those brackets and saying Samford? Yeah, we're picking Samford to win this game.
They can win a game. They are ugly to watch. We talked about them a lot and their struggles, and they still have them. But if you look at their losses, they have, I believe, one home loss in conference play. That was that weird Houston game with the ending. That was kind of messed up and good for Houston for getting the win. All the other games are on the road. You don't play on the road in the NCAA tournament. Technically, it's neutral site. So yeah, does it suck they lost to BYU? Does it suck they lost to Utah? Does it suck they lost to Kansas State and Baylor on the road? Iowa State as well. Yes, but they're undefeated at home, other than that Houston loss. So I will say they can win a game. I will say I trust Bill Self that they are a candidate to be a lower seed and actually go on a short run. I don't think they're national title contenders. I think they can make the second weekend if the bracket matches up the right way. That's not what you're asking, though. You're asking, can they win one game? And I will
I'm
say
sorry.
yes.
Can they win a game is a different question than do you trust them to win a game? I feel like you would agree that's a little bit of a different question because anybody can win a game. It's more, are you going to trust them in your bracket and pick them in they're probably good. They're probably going to be what, a 6, 7, 8 seed.
Right now they're a 7 according to Lenardi, and they're playing Ohio State in the first round. You look at the other 10 seeds. This is where it kind of comes down to like if Kansas did get like a 9 seed and had to play one of these 8 seeds. Maybe I think not so much, but where they're currently situated at and where I think they're going to be seated is probably like a 6 or a 7 when we get to it. I do think they'll probably win a surprising game down the stretch, whether that's one of their home games at Texas Tech against Texas Tech or Arizona. So yeah, I think they can beat one of the bubble teams because the bubble is so weak and like this year is just it's pretty awful with like could Kansas beat Ohio State? Yes. Could Kansas beat like San Diego State? I think so. West Virginia. Those are like some of the 10 seeds in the bracket. So I'll say I trust them to win one game. There is a possibility for them to do even more, but they do need to make some big changes. I know Kansas fans are frustrated with this team, as they should be, but the talent is still there. It's just a weird, odd fit of a team, and I will say I trust them, but my trust does not go too far.
Side note: it feels like we just have an all-time suck of a bubble. Or am I imagining that? Like, it just feels like the bubble is terrible. I know you usually talk about it in terms of weak or strong or whatever, but like, I don't know. If that's one of those relative terms that I don't know if you mean it's weak because, of the number of teams, or if it's strong because of the quality of the team. The quality of the teams on the bubble right now is awful for me. And I know we already talked about tournament expansion last week, but man, I do not like some of these teams on the bubble. I'm like, can we just trim it to like 64? Can we trim it to 62 and just go from there?
That would be nice. As reference for this conversation, Greg, yeah, like the weak bubble, I think last year was actually a pretty good bubble, as evidence of like St. John's being left out. They were 32 in the net. Indiana State was 28 in the net. Um, and the net isn't everything. We're going to talk about another team later who the net's kind of messed up, but like they had quad one wins. Like St. John's last year was 4-10 against the quad one. We're talking about teams who are 1-10 and 1-9 in quad one. And some of the other teams who have like quad four losses and just total bad resumes. So, yes, this is a much weaker bubble. Yes, it probably has a lot to do with the transfer portal, with a lot of the mid major schools we expected to be good not being that great. We could talk about maybe the Mountain West only getting one team in this time around, possibly. We could talk about the West Coast getting maybe two, probably two again, maybe three, maybe. But that's going to take maybe a bid stealer. So it is weaker. And that is why I think it's important to note that like yes, March will happen. There will be upsets in the first round, but I think like I think the second round we're gonna be sitting there like, wow, this game's awesome. We have Memphis versus Houston, or we have Mississippi State versus Michigan, or Missouri versus Purdue. It's gonna be a lot of fun in those second round games.
Yeah, I think you gave me a couple of good segues because the next team I have in here is Gonzaga. Do you trust them to win a game? They just missed out on their second opportunity to beat St. Mary's. They have Santa Clara and San Francisco coming up. As Joe already alluded, he didn't say the team, but The net loves this team. They're 10th in the net. I have zero idea why. I guess they're so efficient in their wins. I think it was the Pepperdine game. They won like 110-57 or something stupid like that. One of the reasons Joe hates the efficiency piece of the net, because I'm sure that's keeping them afloat a little bit. But nonetheless, probably going to be again a mid-range seed, but there's a lot of talent. I considered putting this in the make the second weekend, but I feel like knee-jerk reaction is no to that. So I put them here. They do have the longest Sweet 16 streak right now. I think it's 8 or 9 years. Joe, what are your thoughts on them? Do you trust them to win one game?
Yes, I don't like saying it, but yes, the guard plays there. You're right. I hate the efficiency. They should not be 10th in the net. They should not be as high as they are in the Ken Palm. It's awful. It's disgusting, and people should be ashamed of themselves for letting this be any part of a factor in selection for Selection Sunday. That's what we're given. I like Graham Ike. I still think Mark Few can get the most out of him. Now, here's the thing. There could be a chance this team goes on a run in March if they're currently projected to be an 8 seed right now. I don't think they're going to beat one of. I don't think any of either me or you would pick them to beat any of the projected 1 seeds, whether that's Auburn, Duke, Alabama, whoever else, Florida. If they can get up to like a 5 seed, that's where some damage could happen. Maybe they win their game. Yes, it's a tougher, maybe a tough first round game against a 12 seed. We know how 12-5s work. Then I could see myself picking them to beat a 4 seed. I can't see myself picking them to beat a 1 or 2 seed. So you're right to maybe put them in this category of like, I probably trust them to win one game. I just like too much what the roster was. And maybe it's kind of like you said, there's some teams where I like preseason and I'm like, I'm not quitting this team no matter what. And that sucks. There's other teams like Santa Clara who I said, you guys deserve what you're getting right now because you stink. And Gonzaga is one of those teams I just can't quit. They were such good talent coming back. Some of the transfers haven't worked out as much as they would like, but they still have a lot of those guys from last year's team. So I'll say trust them to win one game. Yes, I'm happy about it. Don't like the net efficiency rankings. Don't like any of that. But for one game, yes. If they want to go on a deeper run, they need to do some work these last couple of weeks to move up to like a 6 seed.
All right, Joe. Next team is tied to Gonzaga because they played on opening night. Baylor, and that is Gonzaga's best win on the resume currently in terms of net. But Baylor, who has tons of talent, but has also been injured at times, lost 3 of their last 4, including a loss to Colorado. Do you trust them to win a game in the NCAA tournament with all of the talent that's on that team?
No, I don't. I like Robert Wright. I think he's the best player on their team. College basketball player, of course. PJ Edgecombe's going to go high in the draft. Defense isn't good, and the offense is inconsistent, so I will say no for them.
I'm going to say yes. I think I'm using kind of that inverse of the Kansas logic where I'm like, all right, who are they probably going to be playing at their seed? It's probably going to be someone that I don't really have strong feelings about. And I feel like this team has enough talent I would trust them to win one game. Beyond that, go ahead.
Can I ask you another team? I don't know if they're on your list.
That's all I got for win a game. So listen, yes, this is your world. We're just living in it.
All right. So I'm going to throw out a comp for them. This team is going to be a higher seed and has had some injuries themselves. But if you trust Baylor to win a game, I think you have to trust Kentucky, who is now a 3 seed in bracketology. But the reason I'm saying that is the Ken Palm numbers are so close when you look at these teams. Like Baylor's 13th in net offensive efficiency. Kentucky is 5. Kentucky's defense is 63. Baylor's defense is 66. So if you're looking at like, hey, I trust Baylor, I think you have to trust Kentucky. If you don't trust Baylor, I think you don't have to trust Kentucky. And that is going to cause some problems for me personally because I will be freaking out that first game of the NCAA tournament because of that Kentucky defense. And especially if for some reason they don't have Jackson Robinson or Lamont Butler, that was just a team I comped them to when I was looking at this earlier today.
That's probably a good comp, and I do trust Kentucky, but I like where you went with that.
Yeah.
All right, let's kind of speed this up a little bit. We don't need a huge analysis, but now we're down to make the tournament.
Okay.
Arkansas this week, they beat Mizzou. They hung with Auburn.
and Texas A&M in the last couple of weeks. Currently 40th in the net, 4 quad 1 wins. You trust them to make the tournament. They actually have, I looked on FanDuel, they're like minus 290 to make the tournament right now. So FanDuel thinks they're in, like, easily.
I think they're in. I think the back half or the last part of their schedule is going to be good for them too, because they just have to notch a couple of these wins, and I don't think the losses will hurt them as much because it's the SEC. But Texas at South Carolina, at Vanderbilt, and Mississippi State at home. If you win two of those, I think you're probably solidly like feel good about your spot heading into the SEC tournament.
I'm going to trust Vegas. I'm going to say they're in, but it is kind of wild to think that no Boogie Fland, and now we're talking about them making the tournament. Okay. Just weird how that one worked out. This one, there's no odds for, so I don't know if this means they're just in or they're just out, but Vanderbilt lost to a shorthanded Kentucky, but then they go and beat Ole Miss. They're 43rd in the net, 3 quad 1 wins. No losses outside of the first 2 quadrants.
Tough. I'll say I don't trust them because I think there's some losses on their remaining schedule, and they have been fading. The win against Ole Miss is going to help, but there's so many losses that they've had in conference play that I think it'll add up.
I want to trust them. It weirds me out that there's odds on all of these other teams and not them, and I don't know what that means. I don't know if they just don't they don't have the fields open or what. Oklahoma had lost 5 straight before they went and beat Mississippi State this weekend. They have 5 quad 1 wins, but they also have a Q3 loss. I believe it's to LSU. They're 51st in the net. FanDuel likes them to get in too.
Yeah, I think I trust them more because of those 5 quad 1 wins. And again, if we're going to have a system like this set up in a way where we're going to evaluate them, let's say 5 quad 1 wins, that's more than like St. John's had last year that we just talked about, who got left out. They seemingly they needed that win this weekend against Mississippi State. If they can get again 2 more wins, just with how impactful they can be with those quad 1, maybe quad 2 opportunities at the end, I think all of them are quad 1 games actually for them. If they can get 2 wins, I think they're in. 2 out of 4.
Next team. Indiana recently beat Michigan State and then yesterday beat Purdue. They are 50th in the net. They have 4 quad 1 wins. Their coach is leaving at the end of the year. They've lost 6 of their last 8, but they're bubblicious apparently. FanDuel has a minus 130 right now to make the tournament.
Gee, Lenardi's all over. He's he don't know what he think. He's had some guys out who are in and got in places who are in or out. And that's, I mean, maybe he hasn't been doing too well.
The betting markets may mean one thing versus, you know what I mean?
True.
It may depend on where people are putting the money and not necessarily what's likely to happen.
This is a tough one because the rest of their schedule is pretty manageable. But that also means maybe not a lot of quad 1 opportunities. They have Penn State at Washington, at Oregon would be a quad 1 opportunity. And then Ohio State, who is on the cusp of being a quad 1 opportunity, but could end up being quad 2. And here's the other thing too. Greg, did you watch Purdue, Indiana yesterday? Or do you get any feel for it?
Oh, I mean, a tiny amount. And watch the whole game like I would have liked to.
It was
the chair.
The chair was good. We have to mention the chair. He went small. He went small in this game, and that changes everything. So it's a little bit of like, this is like the resume, this is everything else. They could theoretically, like, their talent's there. They could go on a run, but if they go small and does that, but he's been so like pent up on playing 1980s basketball with having like a traditional center and power forward. When they took Omar Ballo out of the game, they went on a 28-3 run at the start of the second half. So I'll say I am not confident. I don't trust them to get in because of that, and I don't know if he's going to go back to that. But there is a path, and part of the path is, hey, doing what you should do, beating these teams, but also on the court, maybe go small and have your best players play, and you can do it.
I don't want to see them in the tournament. I'm going to say I don't trust them. I don't think I guess if they finish listen, you already said it, there's nothing on the rest of their resume that or on the rest of the remaining schedule that pops out to me. So they'd have to do some damage in the Big Ten tournament and really show me that they found something, with the changes that they made before I would say, yeah, I want to see them in. But I'll say for now, I don't trust them. Although again, minus 130 right now. Here's one we're just going to do for fun.
Okay.
You don't like this team. Their fans don't like this team. But they have one of the better net of the teams that we've already mentioned. They've won 3 straight. They have 1 quad 1 win. So now you know exactly who I'm talking about.
I know. Yeah.
And it is North Carolina, currently at plus 165 to make the field, which obviously means it's either less likely or people less think it's going to happen. But
So
it's not out of the realm of possibility, which this is why we do not want to expand the tournament to 72 or 76,
Right.
whatever stupid number.
I'm hoping they don't put Indiana and North Carolina in there because of brand. And again, I don't know if Indiana has brand anymore, but some people think they do. So I don't want to see this team in the tournament. I don't think they're going to get into the tournament, and I think it's because of their opportunities left. If they beat Duke, they have a small shot. But even then, that's 2 quad 1 wins this season. So their remaining schedule at Florida State, not a great team. Home against Miami, very bad team. At Virginia Tech, not a great team. And then Duke, you're going to need to see them go on a run in the ACC tournament. And even then, you have to have them have the right matchups in the ACC tournament of like playing Clemson or playing Duke. That doesn't that's not just going to happen. And once you play those games, you have to win, obviously. So I'm going to say no. I don't trust them to make the tournament. No, they shouldn't be in as things are currently constructed. If they do get in, I will think it's because of the brand. I'm hoping that's why I don't trust the committee not to put them in. If that makes sense.
I'll say this: you'd rather see Drake in than North Carolina.
Oh yeah,
on an at-large. Okay, all right, we can all agree on that. Does Drake have more quad 1 wins than North Carolina right now? I don't have their thing open.
No, they both have 1.
Okay. Well, I'd still rather see Drake in than
hey,
North Carolina.
Drake 1-0 in quad 1, 4-1 in quad 2, 10-2 in quad 3. That's going to hurt the at-large chances, but there's a path.
Joe, that's what I got. I thought that was a little bit more fun way. We obviously wouldn't do this early in the season, but I thought we could still do our week overview, but I thought that was a little bit more of a fun way to touch base with kind of what happened throughout the week. We can still zoom through. But and I mean Zoom action. I mean, set the pick and let's go.
Let's get the stopwatch rolling here. Let me pull it up. So, but no, it's good exercise.
We already touched on most of these, so that was kind of the point of doing that. I didn't think that there was the thing about this week. I didn't think there was a lot of huge stories. So instead of just listing 16 games and talking about them individually, I thought we can look at the bigger picture and then give any additional thoughts you have in our week in review whip around Zoom edition.
Yeah, of course.
Double Zoom.
We're going to do this as fast as possible again. So I'm going to do the 3-minute thing. Going to recap it as fast as possible. Give Greg a chance to say 1 or 2 things at the end of every day, and try to get this done within 3 minutes. Greg, I'm going to start it off now. On Monday, we had Arizona beating Baylor. Toby Awaka had 14 points, 12 rebounds. Anything about that result?
Nope. Just Baylor continues to slide, and that's why they ended up in our little thing there.
Definitely. We head off to the Big East for the first game here. We have UConn beating Villanova 66-59. That's important for UConn to stay in the tournament. We had that Purdue-Michigan State game that we talked about earlier that Michigan State won. Moving on, we have Texas A&M and Mississippi State. Mississippi State won this one pretty big, 70-54. Next game up, we have Texas Tech and TCU. Texas Tech drops this one on the road. Uday had 11 points, 10 rebounds in that one to be the star for TCU. Illinois, Wisconsin. We've mentioned Illinois' issues. Wisconsin is coming about, but Illinois having those issues of being sick, so they have lost a couple games. And then Greg, you called the wrong one. BYU beat Kansas, not Oklahoma State this week.
Sorry, Oklahoma State. I tried to gift you guys a win, but it went to BYU. BYU makes their way into the top 25. Good for them. Good for the Big 12. All the other results we've kind of already touched base on. I mean, Texas Tech dropping a game. It happens. I was on the road.
All right, so move on to Wednesday where we have one game, Greg. Missouri may have proved they are real. 110 points to beat Alabama, 110-98. Mark Sears had 35 for Alabama, but Caleb Grill, 25 points and 10 rebounds for Missouri.
He is fun to watch, and I remember seeing him a little bit at Iowa State when he had his little stop there and whatnot. But they have a lot of guys on that team that can really play offense. Curious about what that defense is going to be able to do in March. They might just mess around, and all of a sudden we look up and they're in the Sweet 16.
All right, just over a minute left for Friday and Saturday and Sunday. We have Villanova beating Marquette in an upset. Marquette has struggled, as you mentioned, Greg. Jameer Brickus had 21 points in that one for Villanova. Michigan State beats Michigan. We already talked about that one, 75-62. Jace Richardson had 21 points.
Nothing to add there. We already talked about both of those in our trust exercises.
All right, Greg. To make this quicker, I'm going to run down all the games I have on my ESPN scoreboard that I think are notable, and you let me know if I miss any at the end. 40 seconds here. Alabama beats Kentucky 96-83. Looked like their defense took a step forward in this one. Kentucky obviously not at full strength. We have Duke beating Illinois 110-67. Cooper Flagg 16.7 rebounds. Illinois still having issues with their health. Houston beat Iowa State 68-59. Important to note, Keyshawn Gilbert and Curtis Jones did not play for Iowa State. Tennessee goes on the road and beats Texas A&M 77-69. Chaz Lanier had 20 first half points, finishes with 30. Texas Tech beats West Virginia 73-51. Oregon comes back to beat Wisconsin 77-73. It was a game where Wisconsin was up early and then they blew that lead and Oregon was able to take advantage of that one. Arkansas beat Missouri 92-85, as you mentioned, Greg. Zvonimir Ivisic had 20 points in this one. And a bubble talker, 79-69 for Clemson to beat SMU. BYU beat Arizona 96-95 in a game that had some questionable calls down the stretch. Oklahoma beat Mississippi State 93-87 in a game that also meant a lot for Bubble Talk. Greg, did I miss anything? Or Vanderbilt beat Ole Miss 77-72 as well.
Didn't miss anything, but that call at the end of BYU as Arizona was horrendous. You can never boil a game down to one call, but that was bad.
All right, we're over 3 minutes. We'll shoot for 4, but we also missed. The one I did miss was St. Mary's beating Gonzaga, which we kind of mentioned as well.
Yep.
So moving on to Sunday, we had St. John's beating UConn 89-75. They actually hit the 3 pretty much in the first half, and that kind of got them on a roll, and they kind of dominated the rest of the way. We mentioned Purdue and Indiana. Mike Woodson goes small. It works out. They go on a 28-3 run in the second half. They have the chair that Bobby Knight threw 40 years ago to the day on the sideline for Mike Woodson to use. So how can you not be romantic about college basketball, Greg? What do you think?
Nothing to add there. I think we already talked about this. That's why we did it the fun way. And now what do we got? What was the final time? All right.
4:13.
4:13.
A lot of stuff going on. We'll try to keep it as fast as possible, especially when we have these new and exciting topics like trust and don't trust, which might give us a better chance to talk about teams rather than just recapping, oh, they beat this team, they beat that team. So we'll keep on doing that for the future. Greg, let's get to our picks for the week. Tonight, Monday, Houston and Texas Tech.
I am going with Houston, which means we are going to disagree. Well, I guess I can't. I don't want to give away your pick. I looked all over Twitter today. Chance McMillan did not play in their game this weekend, and unless something has come out in this is a 9:00 game, so we may not hear until right before tip. But unless something has come out in the last hour, it is way up in the air if he's playing. I know the game's at Texas Tech, but I like Houston on both sides of the ball right now. I'll take Houston win.
Yeah, even with him out, he was listed as day-to-day about 2-3 days ago. So I will assume he might play, and I will say that I like Texas Tech at home. JT Toppin's having a great season, and it is a tough place to play in Lubbock. Next one up, Greg, we're moving on to Tuesday where we have Mississippi State and Alabama. A lot of ranked matchups in the SEC this week that are going to decide a lot of conference tournament spots, too.
I am going to take, again, I don't want to ever, I want to double check myself. Alabama, Mississippi State, solid team. Feels like they're alternating wins and losses, and that is just a product of the tough league they're in. I don't think they're going to win at Bama.
Yeah, I think Bama is back on the right track after losing that game to Missouri. That defense looked better against Kentucky, partially because Kentucky didn't have full strength. But they looked like Phylon kind of locked in defensively, and they looked pretty good. So I'm going to trust that defense to kind of step forward, much like it did last March for Alabama, because they were not a good defensive team, but they put enough together to make a Final Four. On Wednesday, we have Michigan State versus Maryland on the road. Maryland is 16 in the country. Michigan State is 8.
I am going to mess around and believe in Michigan State. I feel like, yes, Maryland has that interior edge, but I don't know, man. Michigan State's just going to mess around and maybe have a great week because I'm going to, spoiler alert, I'm going to pick them in another game
Okay.
later in the week. Joe, last week I took a bit of a bloodbath in our picks. Joe actually took the lead on me on the year for the first time, so he now holds a 3-point edge over me in picks for the year. So I also, not that this is why I'm picking Michigan State, but I got to pick against him here and there, get that lead back.
I did not think I was going to catch you this year after I think you got one or two conference tournament champions right, which is worth 5 points. I was like, okay, there's no shot, but here we
You
are.
mean the
Or
Feast
the
Weeks.
Feast Week tournament. Certainly, you're right. We'll do it. We'll do the same thing for conference tournaments, and we'll do it on the show to make sure everyone knows what our picks are for the major conference tournaments. We probably won't get to a lot of the minor ones that are going to start next week. Greg, have you heard the nickname for Maryland this year for the players?
the Crab Five, and I love it.
The
That's, but I'm still not picking them.
best nickname in college sports history. I don't know what to see it, but
I would say at least this decade.
yeah, I mean, awesome, and I love the front court players they have: Derek Queen and Julian Reese. But the perimeter guys, I mentioned Selton Miguel, transferred in from USF, and just a really good shooter. That has opened things up, and they are better offensively. So if it was on the road at Michigan State, I would take Michigan State. Because Maryland's at home, I'm taking them, and I think they can combat this Michigan State team who doesn't have that perimeter threat on a consistent level, unless Jace Richardson wants to become that guy. All right, Ole Miss and Auburn is also on Wednesday. Ole Miss has just fallen out of the top 25 after that loss to Vanderbilt, but Auburn 13-1 in SEC play, 25-2 overall. Do we think they're going to go get a win here against Ole Miss?
I am going to take Auburn, but remember, this Ole Miss team with that staunch defense is what gave Auburn issues the last time they played. Granted, that was at Ole Miss. Could be a close game, but I think ultimately Ole Miss is a decent team that, again, kind of just in the same spot that Mississippi State is. We're just playing this tough schedule, so you're gonna start putting losses together. Probably, I mean, they're still gonna make the tournament, still gonna be a decent seed, but in this game, I'll take Auburn.
Yeah, if it was on the road, I might take Ole Miss to win. I know we already had that game, but this is a I don't know if they will go the rest of the regular season in conference tournament without a loss. They'll probably lose one. So maybe next week I'll pick a loss. But yeah, I think being at home is the difference here. The defense might give them troubles, but they'll be able to figure it out. Move on to Saturday, Greg. The first one we have up. It is coincidentally it's Auburn again. We have Auburn at Kentucky.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Just happens to be they play on a Wednesday and then their early game on Saturday, so we pick it first. But I am going to take Auburn. There's not, if you want to say because it's at Rupp, you might consider taking Kentucky, fine, but I still want to see them get healthy and, start putting something together before I pick them to beat the best team in the land, even at home.
Yeah, they don't expect Jackson Robinson or Lamont Butler back for this one. The latest rumor I heard is both of them are looking like they're going to try to play. I think Lamont Butler, I guess they said might try to play at Auburn, but he's more realistically going to play against LSU next week on Tuesday. And Jackson Robinson might play in the season finale at Missouri. But that is a stretch you might save him for conference tournament week. And to be honest, with there already being a lock to be in pretty much with the 8 quad 1 wins, I understand it. So I will say Auburn wins. If Kentucky was full strength, they might go Kentucky. But they, definitely are a far thing from full strength right now. Next one up, Greg, we have Alabama and Tennessee, a rivalry game in football. We'll see what they can do on the hardwood.
I'm excited for this game. I am going to take Tennessee and that defense to frazzle the Crimson Tide. And Lanier coming off a 30-point game, I'm going to take him. Obviously, I believe they have a game earlier in the week, but I'll take him to have another big game against Bama at home in Knoxville.
I'm going Tennessee as well. I think the defense comes into play here. I mentioned Alabama's defense looks like it's getting better. I want to see them take another step, though, before I take them in like big road games like this one. We will move on to Arizona and Iowa State. It is a game that will be at 9 p.m. on ESPN. Arizona's ranked now. Iowa State's number 9 after losing without some of their key players. Greg, what are you thinking?
I am going to take Iowa State. Just one of those teams that I have. This is one of those teams I have a certain feeling about. They're at home. They're playing Arizona, who, as we know, have been slipping as of late. I like Iowa State overall better, and I like them in this game to win.
I like Iowa State too. I would be careful if they have those guys out for much longer. I would recommend for them to like rest some of these guys and like make sure they're 100% for the tournament, because we saw how badly Iowa State looked when they had a guy come out of the rotation. So I will go Iowa State. I would say watch for the injury reports if you're going to pick or gamble on this game, and then also do so for March too. Make sure those guys are back healthy before you really truly believe in Iowa State. Next one up, the last pick on Saturday we have is Texas A&M and Florida. Greg, a battle of teams who could be in contention for one of the number 1 seeds.
I'll take Florida, just kind of based off of my comments about Texas A&M. I like them, but it's that efficiency, that consistency that sometimes kind of gets me, which means next week we're coming back and we're talking about how Phelps and Wade Taylor combined for 65 and Florida got dog walked out of the gym. But I'll take Florida.
This is tough because like I think Florida, I might have to pick number 1 seeds to the Final Four, Greg, because like I love this Florida team the way they play. They've had guys injured and step up. Elijah Martin missed some time. They have Alex Condon just got hurt, and then everyone remembers Michael Handlogden, who got hurt last year. Was not necessarily expected to come back this year. Has stepped back into the lineup and helped with the absence of Alex Condon. They still have Chinulu inside. So with the guard play with Walter Clayton rolling, I really like this team. Since they're at home, I'll pick them. I think it was on the road to be a closer game, but I think this team has right behind Auburn, and it's maybe not crazy to say because they're the number 3 team in the country, but Auburn and Duke, I think they have the third best chances to make the Final Four and possibly cut down the nets. I think it's a big step down from Auburn and Duke, but I'll put it out there. Moving on to Sunday, Greg. You mentioned already your pick here, but I guess keep it suspenseful as possible. But let's go with Michigan State and Wisconsin. Michigan State hosts them in this one. This could be big for the end of the Big Ten standings. Just to note that Michigan State has 3 conference losses. Wisconsin has 5, but there's also Michigan who has 3 and Maryland who has 5. So all those teams kind of trying to battle it out these last 2 weeks.
Big week for Michigan State and Greg World. So putting a lot of trust in this team. The last team I put this much trust in was Georgia. That worked out for me. So, hey, I'm feel like I'm putting my trust in a more steady team than Oklahoma State this time. So,
oh boy, yeah, Michigan State. I think I'm picking to win this one. If I'm going to pick them to lose at Maryland, I'll pick them to win this one. Even though I do think neutral court, I'd probably pick Wisconsin. I really do like their offense. It's a little bit different than most years, and I think it gives them more of an upside than Michigan State, who doesn't have that offense yet. But again, Chase Richardson, please just step up and be a star in March. It'd be really fun if you did that. All right, so Greg, those are our picks for the week. You have some games to watch, and you have it started off on Tuesday. Baylor and Cincinnati.
I would advise Baylor win that game. It's going to be real dicey if they don't.
That is a bubble watch special if I've ever seen one. Cincinnati on the outside looking in and has a lot of work to do, to be honest, because not even in the next 4 out. And Baylor obviously sliding the last couple weeks. Next one up, Florida and Georgia. That one is also on Tuesday.
Do they call this anything, or is that just football? I have it on here because, and it's funny you mentioned it a few minutes ago, but Alex Condon is supposed to play. I just saw Alex Condon is supposed to play in this game. Florida might be interesting to watch, but I would imagine they're going to win this game. But do they call it anything like they do for the football? Okay, all right. Well, world's largest whatever for football.
Outdoor cocktail party.
Yeah,
this is the world's largest indoor cocktail party. We'll call it
there
that.
There you go.
I'm going Florida in this one, but it is important. Georgia is in the first 4 out for Joe Lunardi's bracketology.
This would be a huge win for them. This might put them on the right side of the bubble.
I think it would. I'll have a new bracketology out next week, and then obviously more frequently in March. But Lunardi has them as the first 4 out. They're probably within right on the bubble range right now. Next one up, Greg. UCLA, Purdue. This one is on Friday.
Is Rondo having fun right now?
Rondo is trying to get his toys out, and All right. You talk about UCLA Purdue. I'm going to get Rondo and show him on
Okay.
the screen.
All right. UCLA Purdue, I just think is interesting because Purdue's obviously in the middle of a 4-game skid. UCLA, I don't know what to do or what to think about them or where they're going to end up or whatever. They're going to be in the tournament, I have to imagine, but I feel like this is a game they want bad. Purdue's in the middle of a skid. Who knows what's going to happen in this one? I picked Purdue in our picks, but Purdue's let me down a lot lately. So
Absolutely. It is a game to watch on Friday. I like how there's some games to watch on Fridays this time around. Big Ten is scheduling very, very well with that. So definitely worth checking out if you don't have anything going on Friday. Saturday, Texas Tech and Kansas, Greg.
this is a game that if you told me in the preseason I'd even have my radar on, I'd be like, why? Kansas is going to blow the brakes off Texas Tech. And now it's why Texas Tech is going to blow the brakes off Kansas. So that just shows you how much things change from preseason to early season to midseason to late season. Kansas needs something, man. So this feels like an in earnest game. It's obviously not like a must win or anything, but this kind of win would be really helpful to their cause if they're trying to get right and, I don't know, turn into something before the tournament.
Yeah, Texas Tech doesn't need this as bad. We'll see if they're healthy at that point. As you mentioned, Terrence McMillan being hurt, but they also, if you're right, Kansas is not just like winning this game to like avoid sliding to the bubble. I think they're probably going to be in almost no matter what. But if you can get your seed line up to the 6 or 5, like it's so much better than like the 7 or 8. So it kind of goes without saying that, but like this year especially. Next one up, Missouri and Vanderbilt. This one is also on Saturday.
Bubblicious for Vanderbilt. Missouri just coming off losing to Arkansas. They got to go to Vanderbilt. I picked Missouri, but I don't know, man. Weird things happen.
Yeah, Missouri, they can really improve their seed line if they get a couple good wins down the stretch. They only have quad one losses. They're 6-7 in quad one and 15th in the net. So that's important for them just as much, maybe, as Vanderbilt winning this one, as they are one of the last four in for Joe Lenardi. On Sunday, we have Illinois and Michigan.
I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and pick Illinois to win this game. I do have it in our picks like that. I'm going to hope that by Sunday they are healthy and no more flu and everybody's back on the court and they get a much needed win. If I'm going to say, hey, I trust them to make the second weekend, despite what their seed's going to be, then I got to pick them to win this kind of game.
I'm going Michigan in this one. I'm not like Michigan. I think is a team that struggled more than I would have liked at different games. The guard play does scare me. I think the turnovers scare me, but I think they can win this one at home with Illinois and all their issues. Illinois is a team that did maybe have the highest ceiling out of any Big Ten team, but because they've been sick, they haven't been able to develop as much as you would like. So hopefully they can get hot here down the stretch for their sake. But I'm going Michigan. Greg, any final thoughts for the week?
We have given the people more thoughts than they even wanted.
Oh boy, that's never
true. And we've given them Rondo noises. So
we've given them Rondo noises. Shown Rondo on the broadcast a little bit here. Yeah, it's been a fun week. We cannot give you guys enough content because college basketball just keeps us going with so many big things going on. It is my turn to remind everyone to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, wherever you have it, and also to like and subscribe on YouTube on the Game House YouTube channel. It helps us out when we have more views, we have more likes. You can also put in any comments on YouTube, and we will try to answer them on the show. If you have any interest in that, we can kind of go through that, especially when we get closer to March Madness, as a lot of people have more questions. We get to that point for both Greg and I, usually in person or over text, but we definitely are willing to help people with their brackets and everything else. But a lot of basketball left to be played. For now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.